let's dive right in.
Okay.
I don't really have much to think about right now, so I'm hoping you have some topics. I know you sent me some materials, and I watched them, and a couple of them, I was a little confused at what direction you wanted to take it in, and I was assuming my direction, but I also want to hear like what you thought about, and obviously, the subject matter. I don't know. You just go ahead. You start off.
All right. Well, there's a lot of ins and outs, so I'm gonna practice taking that time. So this incident happened. I sent you those same videos as I sent to a friend of mine who, for the most part, talks to me about these things, but does not get down with some of the more outlandish theories. So he always shuts those down pretty fast. But in the course of our conversation, I started kind of defining this whole thing. And it even turned out that I was defining what this podcast is, or what this type of conversation is and what it's for, and things like that. First of all, what did you think, just generally, of what that guy was saying? Like, how did that strike you?
The second video of the guy talking about coronavirus and viruses in general.
Yeah.
So I feel like I could go off right now about this. So I don't know if you want to ask me that question right now. I got a good amount of stuff to say.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to see where you were like feeling, because from what you just said, I think you're kind of vibing how my friend was about it. Maybe.
I don't know.
Maybe. I could definitely be wrong, but maybe. So before you go into all that, let me just try to describe what's going on some more. So I sent this to him, and his response was, so first of all, that was one video. It was just too long to send. So I don't know if I even remember what was in the different sections right now, but I think in the last video, he was talking about things like, get outside, drink more water, or whatever, those kinds of general health things. And so I just sent the 4 videos, just left him there. And his response was like, thanks for sending this. I did what he was saying at the end about being healthy and this and that. And I was like, that's great. But that is not the point. That was not what's important about this video to me. And he was like, he just couldn't wrap his head around what it was that I thought was so important about this information. Now, let me say this. Whether it's true or not, it is novel to me. And I'm saying it opened up, it added another dot and connected a line for me, whether it's true or not. And he didn't understand a conversation in which I did not have a conclusion or a bias. So I had to describe it like, look, we live in this world and things seem to be this way. That's what he kept going back to. Well, what about what they said at this point in time about that? And I said, okay, that is that. But what this guy is saying, whether he is a real doctor or not, he got hung up on the fact that he was like, I'm a genius. And he was like, be skeptical of people who say that. And I was like, I don't believe him because he said he's a genius. I believe him because he said he's a doctor. And ostensibly, if he is, I don't know if he's a doctor, but if he is, he's probably done firsthand experiments in petri dishes under microscopes. So on that basis, I want to listen up. And then he made a hell of a lot of sense. Whether it's like real truth or not, he weaved a good argument. So I wanted to listen. And it's novel to me because if it's true, it would change a lot. It would explain a lot. And so all I was saying to him is like, this is the world. And yet someone is claiming the world is different than that. We've got a case on our hands. I don't believe him. I don't want to continue to just believe in the established idea of things. So I'm in the middle and I'm going down this case. That's what this conversation is between me and him. And I put it like this. Usually, and this is how the conversation first started. usually conversations are point, counterpoint, etc. Back and forth, no real conclusion. And then I said, what I'm trying to do here and what we're trying to do here, what we do here and stuff, all that, what Bohm and Krishnamurti did is the same pattern. It's what Socrates did too. It's the same pattern of the dialectic. Do you know what that is? We've probably talked about it.
I don't know the exact definition, but again, it's one of those things I could assume what the definition is.
Sure.
But go ahead. If you have one, go ahead.
Context clues, yeah. So it's a debate or a discussion for the express purpose of finding a synthesis. So you have thesis, antithesis, synthesis. So we are not against each other because conversations like that don't go anywhere. If I present something over the line and you say, whoa, 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 that's not what science says right now, then we can't have that conversation out there. But if you suspend your beliefs and just go on the case and just follow what's going on, we're working in the same direction and we might discover something. He also didn't understand that part of it, that I didn't have a vested interest one way or the other, that I just wanted to discover what it was. If this guy is telling the truth or not, it seems important to me. And we can go into why it's important later. But that's in the nutshell, what happened.
Okay, I'm glad that's exactly where you took it, because that's where I took it too. And that's where I was going to say I have a lot of feelings about the situation, but they're not exactly about what the guy was talking about. It's the underlying theme, right? And which is exactly what you just described. So, and I do want to just, for podcast purposes, explain the videos, because it's one of those where it's being pulled, quote unquote, pulled from the internet. Who knows if it's actually being pulled from the internet? Sometimes people use that as a ploy. They say that so that people actually watch the video, It appeals to conspiracy theorists. So I could probably find the video and post it below, but I don't know if I can or not. You can. Okay.
My friend did. He went that route in defense of that other. He was like, well, I found his page and he's just some nut. And that's all right with me.
Exactly. Basically, the video is just about a guy talking his theory on what viruses are, about how you cannot catch a virus and why. And that's it in a nutshell. So when I watched the video, my mind went about a million different places, as it usually does. But exactly what you said is, I don't really personally care about the information itself and whether it's true or not. What I see is most people, and like you said, it's kind of like tit for tat. Most people get in that conversation of tit for tat of like, what about this point? What about that point? What about this point? And it just goes back and forth, and you can actually infinitely extend that conversation into forever. Like it just, you can do tit for tat all night. It's like similes. It's just a back and forth game. So I'm gonna just, again, tangent. I'm gonna go off on a tangent for a second and then get back to my main point, just because I don't want this to go unsaid, that the conspiracies where it involves whole institutions where there's more than like 5, 10, 15, 20 people involved, where it's literally like global institutions are wrong, especially with viruses. When it comes to you can't catch them, they don't actually spread that way. He said they are created in the body. They do replicate in cells, but they are not alive. He's correct about that.
He is correct about that.
He is correct about that. They are not alive. And the reason they're not seen as alive is because they necessitate a host to stay relevant, is what I would say.
Even to have like a purpose, really. They have no function. They don't
function
walk around
outside
and eat
of
food
the
and
exactly.
They're just there for that.
Yeah, they need it. But isn't that what we are? Don't we need the earth and everything outside of us to stay alive?
Right.
So you can get into that conversation, but I just want to throw that aside. Like, all I'm saying is that when conspiracies come to like there's multiple institutions across the whole world, and all of them are kind of in this conspiracy together, that's where I'm like, humans aren't that smart, and humans aren't that loyal, and humans aren't, there are situations where this does happen. So I'm not,
sure,
you know me, I'm not discounting it fully. It's just, you need a big, strong case for this. And this is kind of one of those where this is the first time I heard this from this one guy.
Yeah, but that's why it's novel. I was like,
that's why it's novel. Yeah. Okay. I don't want to get into that. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, actually, I do want to stop on that point, okay, if you don't mind. So if that point is raised a lot, and my friend did raise it too, not specifically like that way, but even just that there is a shadow government of maybe 10 or 20 or 100 guys, that can keep it a secret. He says he doesn't give them enough credit to be able to pull something off like this. And so in a world though, if you really, let me continue it and I'll come back if I can. I'm trying to give some context for something that's just so abstract, but this is what I said. You have a certain set, or like a certain evidence that is used as an explanation for how viruses work, according to I was talking in these terms with my friend, the thesis world, which is this world, the world where there aren't aliens or whatever. The normal world is the thesis. And that's, gravity and like these absolutes that you don't know. You've never known it for yourself. You just know that it's established. That's this. And there's an antithesis. This guy's saying it's not quite like that. But it's interesting because whether it's the thesis or the antithesis, the same evidence could lead to either conclusion. Because, so just take a virus, for example. If I can, how it's said in the thesis, I have some virus and it comes into contact with you, it jumps, you get it. This guy says you cannot catch it. And yet you have these, mirrorings of this thing going on. So I was just theorizing, what if, for instance, like it's a cold sore, right? Skin to skin, it moves, right? But what if I just have it and that is in contact with your skin, nothing moved across, just something in your cells that are latent that everyone has turned on, which is up until, except for this portion, you agree, the textbooks in the thesis world agree that viruses replicate in the cells after the first jumping from another host. But what if it just manifests? The evidence would support both. You know what I'm saying? So in that case, you could have a worldwide ignorance by doctors who are seeing shit with their own eyes. And they say, well, that could lead to this conclusion, which is what everybody says it is. And so the doctors fuse it out. But do they really know? And then we as people take that and say, that's what they said. That's what it is. But this guy said something else. And the same evidence could support his idea. And so I want to know which way it goes.
You're actually correct. But it's not either or, it's both. And he's falling under that same issue that you just described that scientists of the thesis might be falling under. Because the only reason a virus can interact with your body is because it is interacting with your DNA, which is making something happen, right? So it's like, there's connections in your cells that the virus has to latch onto and manipulate. It's kind of like a key in a lock. It has to be able to stick its key in your lock to unlock the cell to do what it needs to do.
Right. Which
then within the cell, it does replicate. So it's the same. It's exactly what he's saying where, and it's more of what you're saying, where it's kind of built into the human genome, the DNA, that this stuff can happen. So it does emerge that way, where if it doesn't interact, like if it doesn't have the right key for our lock, it can't. And so it needs to be able to interact in some way, which means that it needs to have some kind of information transference as well as have the just the physical touch, right?
Sure.
The physical touch is kind of like the probability. The information transference is science. What scientists do is they take that principle and they make it very physical.
Right.
He took that principle and he made it very metaphysical.
Sure.
And both things are happening. And so where I don't like where that guy was coming from and why I can't fully agree with what he said is because he's saying it's this, not that. Scientists are saying it's this, not that. From his perspective.
Right. So it's tit for tat.
Yeah, it's tit for tat. He took a perspective and he's saying, oh, this is what they're not seeing. So this is what is right. And then they're saying, you're not seeing this aspect. This is what is right. And again, this is where I go. This is where I wanted to go with this. Tit for tat. I'm kind of done playing tit for tat.
Yeah.
It never works.
I know.
All it does is further divide.
Yeah.
The conversation.
You can go on all day or you can just end it right away. It doesn't matter. It's just
exactly. It's tit for tat is not where I'm going, and it's not where we go with this podcast. And I like, what's the word again? You just used dialectic.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we're trying to get that level below. And actually I visualize that it's the same thing I've brought up, about 10 times in this podcast, but it's that idea of when you have the singularity at the bottom and you have the triangle coming out, the vertex point, right? Mm-hmm. And you have all these layers all the way up that inverted pyramid, right? And so the singularity is where everything is the same thing. And then as it grows out into complexity, and every layer is more complex than the next, right? That's the whole idea. It's like, the smaller surface area of that triangle, the less complex the interactions are on that layer.
Yeah.
Then the more you move up, the more interactions are, there's a larger surface area where more interactions can take place. So everybody's on that surface level, that kind of like what I can see, what I can perceive, what I can think about right now, that's like right in front of me. The very like trying to pinpoint very specific stimuli of very specific things and segregate it from the rest of the sea of information, right? That's what they're doing. Tit for tat. I'm going to take this very small portion thing and I'm going to argue that, guys, this is reality. And then somebody over here is like, no, this is reality. And I want to get it on that level below where those 2 points kind of come and they become one thing. And then if you get even deeper, more of those tit for tats become the same thing, and you get an even deeper, and even deeper.
So I said something earlier, and I said I'll say it, and I'll come back for the context thing. And oh boy, I'm doing it now. Say what you just said is just so right that it just triggered this thing. What was the last sentence? Tit for fucking tat.
That should be the name of this episode. Tit for fucking tat. Yeah. So when you go deeper and deeper down the layers, and then they become one thing, and then it's like more and more tit for tats become one thing.
Right. So what my friend didn't realize about why I felt this was so important is that he was seeing it only at that surface level and just taking the words he was saying only. And I was, when I heard it, like you said, 1,000 thoughts were going off. And so you saw, or you felt somehow that it was, you're seeing this idea or whatever, but you see its wider significance. You see that and you want to move into that. Where most people, they don't have that sense that it goes somewhere else. And they just say, well, no, look at the wall here, and it never moves. But the deeper part, yes.
The reason you want to do that is because right now, people are only thinking about what to think. They're not thinking about how to think.
Yes.
And you need a full picture to devise a proper solution.
Yes, you do.
And that full picture contains the connections between everything as well. So it's almost like in that visual representation, you're sitting on that surface level looking at the tit for tat. You have to go deeper to see how that expanded from the beginning of time And then you have to come back up and take all the lessons you learned through that whole thought process and place it back upon the tit for tat.
Right. And so account for all of those.
So that when you're actually, you have to choose a tit for tat, because guess what? There's another layer coming. There's another level, a further projection into complexity. You're going to divide more and more and more. So when you do have to choose an action within space-time, it's better to get that whole thought process going of seeing where everything came from, project it back out to the surface level that you're at now, to know what, I have a full understanding of the situation. I can be confident in my choice without having blind confidence.
Yes.
So this is exactly where I wanted to take the conversation. Is what we're trying to do here is explain how you should think about these things, because when it comes to all the ideologies,
it's even broader than that. I'm sorry. It's how to think about how to think.
Exactly.
It's not how to think. I'm not telling anyone how to think. We're talking and also conveying, hopefully, if we do it well, how it is that we are thinking about how it is one thinks or should think, or what do I think?
Because
what could I think?
I don't even know that. Right. It's like we're trying to work that out here.
Right.
Most people aren't even talking about this, let alone trying to work it out. So I'm not saying I know how to think. I'm not saying that.
Yes.
Even we might not even get there.
With that.
We're concerned with that. That's perfect. Exactly.
And that's kind of where it's crazy how much of what's coming up just by our riffing with, you don't know all the details, how much of this was brought up between me and my friend. And I was trying to say, so like we kind of talked about this little paradox too, with like the expanding universe kind of thing. But it's like the deeper you go, the more complex it is. But it's like you're getting deeper and you're getting a wider picture, but it's also harder to convey because there's more elements involved now.
Exactly.
So the other really has to come down into that level to sort of start feeling that out, to that feeling of this wider thing for themselves. It's really hard to convey this underneath and why and how it seems confusing, but just trust me, just go into this and the paradox will be resolved. But people don't want to go there.
Well, I feel like that's the only place I can go confidently, because the first thing I thought when you sent me that video was, I'm not a virologist. I know nothing about this subject matter. And the reason I to be confident in speaking about this is because I haven't looked through the microscope. I have not ran the tests. I have not seen the science or the data. And even if you see the data, if you look up a research paper, a lot of research papers generally get so detailed in their descriptions.
You don't understand.
You don't. Well, actually, I still try to read them. Sometimes I don't understand it, but I still try to read them.
The layman, generally speaking, isn't going to know what that really means.
It's like when I read Wholeness in Implicate Order by David Bohm. There's equations and formulas in there, and I don't understand those. But the thing is, if I read the whole chapter, I can kind of formulate a picture, and next time I read it, I might get a little bit more and more and more, right? But anyway, still, I have no interest in virology, like none. Like I just can't get into it. I have too many other things that I'm actually interested in that like pique my interest, and I want to think about them. So that's the surface level stuff. There's a whole sea of that. There's it's so complex. Like you said, there's so many different elements that for me to know about all of it and be able to intermingle them all, which you have to do to develop a complete picture to choose that right path. Right. And I can't, man, that's just too hard. Like I can't, you'd have to be, that's what a genius is by today's standards, is you just know everything. You know all of the things, everything, all the little elements. My brain is not processing all of that. So what I do is I go to the next level down where it gets smaller and smaller amount of data that I can utilize to then project back up. Because again, I can't pay attention to all the elements. I don't know about virology. So I'm just here you go. I'm going to go down. I'm going to speak about the things that I can speak about the subject, where I can feel confident in it. Too many people feel confident speaking about subjects they know absolutely nothing about the elements, like politics. Everybody's a politician now. Race. Everybody thinks they know about race when they haven't even taken one like sociology, even like a general sociology course, or like even like race study, like, and even race studies, you're segregating a bunch of elements around it that intermingle with it that you need to know. So everybody's just so confident in their ideologies, but they haven't even thought about that level down where they connect.
Right.
And so that's where you're saying we need to think about thinking.
Yeah.
That's like, we're not talking about the things. We're not talking about the specific ideas themselves. We're talking about how to combine them, synthesize them, discern a better path. And that you do need to kind of get into the archetypes, the meaning, the history. Right. And I would call it the history, but not in the fact, again, history, you can go back thousands of years and you're just more and more elements. I'm talking about the history of like literally how ideas and ideologies grow from existence.
Now, and see, since, we're not specialists, like this is yet another point that came up, like we can still be confident because we're concerned with thinking about thinking. And so we are doing our own sort of firsthand experiments on what's going through our minds and coming out of our mouths or whatever. One of the points that my friend brought up is, well, for one, he asked, like, so should we just throw away science? What does that mean for all of science? And I pointed out that that's kind of what science is. It's like based on the fact that you are questioning old truths. And we can do that too. Me and him as non-specialists, non-scientists, he's like, how are we going to solve this case? How are we going to get this info? And I said, by ourselves, by talking about it. And there's, and he's saying that anything that I can talk about is information that I've learned from somebody else. So, well, yeah, but I'm not hooked on just the surface, what those words are. And they have implications. And so you use them in the flow of conversation to get where you're going. Yes, it's very difficult, but everyone is qualified to do this. And another thing that occurred within this discussion is I don't know much about viruses, but like, for instance, I did remember immediately that, like, from grade school, that viruses are technically not living things. I was like, oh, that's true. But my friend, when we were discussing this, he didn't know any of that. And he's like, well, I don't know anything about any of this. And he kept saying, I'm dumb. And I was like, listen, you're not dumb. Because this guy, he's a writer. He reads not as much. He claims he could read more or whatever. But I'm saying whatever you think is not good enough is still probably more reading than 90% of Americans or the world, probably. This guy's a novel reader or whatever. Most people don't read a lot. So I was like egging him on because I don't believe that he's dumb. I think he was taking a weak exit, and I was inviting him to come down to this next level because everyone's capable of doing this, of being concerned with how to think about how to think and go from there. Like you're gonna learn about yourself from that. No doubt about it.
And what you just said there about, is science null? Does science even matter at that point, because it's built off of history, and to get new formulas of new things, you kind of got to learn the formulas of old, right? Mm-hmm. Science used to be a lot more philosophy and a lot more, we don't exactly know what's going on in the world. So we have to come up with a hypothesis of what we think is happening, which that takes literally just thinking about the situation and getting to those deeper levels to then project back out into the complexity and figure out the formulas, the connections, and all that. So nowadays you've seen memes and people talk about it like, hey, I'm going to get a degree in philosophy. And people are like, oh, have fun being poor for the rest of your life. What's that? What are you going to do with that? And and really the answer is I'm going to make good decisions. I'm going to be able to talk about situations and different ideas without having a goal in mind, like an ideology that's leading them down a path, I'm going to throw all that out. I'm going to start from the beginning, start from square one, build a case from there. And if my structure is strong enough, anything you throw at it, it's going to be able to handle it. And if it's really good, it's actually going to be able to absorb it.
Right.
It's going to be able to say, people are going to be like, well, what about this counterpoint? And you're going to be like, that's actually part of it. That's actually part of the argument. And that's how you build the strongest bases, by accounting for all aspects of anything that you could throw at it. So when we get in this tit for tat, like we've been saying, there's so many elements on the surface level that it's hard to weave through it. And that's where it could extend infinitely. But there's a main thing there. And I'm kind of moving into how you get to this point of not playing tit for tat anymore. Is the main element is, why is there always a tit for a tat? Why?
Yeah.
How come there is always an exact opposite of your ideology?
Yes. I always just wonder, like, can you not, just for once, could you try not being the devil's advocate or whatever? Just see where it goes instead. Because we all know how this happens, like where it leads, and it's nowhere.
That's devil's advocate. Devil's advocate. That's a game you can play forever, because there is always a tit for a tat. It doesn't matter what you bring up. And that's what a devil's advocate does. They say, I don't actually believe this point, but I'm going to bring it up because it is in opposition to yours.
Right.
And you can always do that. That never stops.
Yeah. And it's small. It's so cheap. And like you said, like, I don't want to participate in that anymore. So the opposite question, or the flip side of that question, is I feel also that I'm always wanting to have these conversations because I always want to go beyond that tit for tat. And so my question always becomes, why doesn't anyone ever meet me there? It's the same question as, why is there always some resistance or something like that? It's just, it feels so natural for me to want to drop down into that next level or beyond. And it's frustrating, because if no one meets me there, then that means on every other occasion where I'm not being met at a deeper level, I have to rise to another level for the other person, every time. So, yes.
It's kind of a paradox, because most people have so many struggles that are on the surface level that they're trying to weave through and take care of, that they get bogged down with it, and they don't have time. They don't have time or the energy to take that next step into the deeper level. You know what I'm saying? Like, right. But the thing is, when you go into that deeper level, generally that's going to help you take care of all those surface level problems.
Yes.
To realize that, to recognize that, takes a lot of intuition. It takes a lot of, it's that moment that we talked about last time, where you have to step back and let things just be for a second. And then something works itself out and you go, well, that was oddly convenient, but it's not convenient. It's really, you're taking that step back and looking at the thing as a whole, accepting how the surface level is right now, and just surface level is the way it is. Let's let that be for a second. Let's take a step back, and where do all these things connect to find the root of the problem? And when you find the root of the problem, even just one level down, if you take care of that root, that extends into so many other things that all of a sudden 5 problems disappear. Right. They become null. They're taken care of. And you go, well, that was convenient. It's like, no, you did something there.
Right.
But to recognize you did something there, that's where then you have to repeat the pattern. That's the novelty. You have to repeat that pattern. And most people just, what happens is that those 5 things go away, but 5 more things take its place. And then they think like, that didn't work. And it's like, no, you got rid of some problems, but you're always going to have problems. That is part of being alive. You are a limited being in a limited world.
Yeah.
And you have a sea of things around you that are trying to kill you at all times. Like
Right.
Even now, man, and it's been said by a million different people, but we, as far as the human race, historically, we are very peaceful. Historically, we are very, we've overcome so many of the ails and sicknesses that kill humans that we're like riding the wave, man. If you think about the pandemic and the coronavirus, and you look at what it's like an apocalypse, right? But you look at what people are actually doing. They're watching Netflix. They're getting food delivered to them. They're sitting on their butts all day. Yeah. They don't have to work. The government is paying out money. Again, obviously you can play tit for tat. There's other people that are suffering, and this is the worst situation. Yeah. Okay. Yes. So let's put that. We're not talking about that, but you know what I'm saying? Like, human race has come so far that we started even creating our own issues.
Yes.
And where we're starting, we're always, not only do we have things that are trying to kill us, but we're always creating new problems for ourselves because we need that struggle in order to evolve into something greater. And so at some point, when you have conquered everything around you, you do this subconscious thing where you make this own inner struggle within yourselves so you can become a better person, because there needs to be that, or else your life doesn't have meaning. You become the stagnant thing. If you think you're the apex of all evolution and this is where it ends and we have nothing else to live for, there's no greater thing to become, why are you even living? And that's what happens. You get depressed, you get anxious, you get emotional, and you're like, there's no meaning here. Why am I even alive? You start asking those questions. So you need that push to become something greater. So you can get lost in it very easily, where then you forget that there is those other layers down that will help you take care of more and more issues on a grander scale. Right now, that's how I feel the whole world is. We're so divisive in our ideologies on that surface level, whether it's race or politics or health or whatever it is, man. It's always tit for tat. And that's why this is actually, it's such a relevant and necessary conversation.
Definitely.
And I'm glad that you did bring up those videos, because it's like, that's what you're getting at. It's like, no, I'm not even talking about what that guy is saying necessarily. I'm talking about that guy believes that. Yeah. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he has some kind of ulterior conspiracy motive that he's going off on, right?
But let's pretend he believes. Let's pretend he believes.
Maybe he's a Russian spy that's putting out misinformation, quote unquote. I don't even like the word misinformation. He's putting out stuff on the internet to try to get people to argue about things, right?
Sure.
Even so, there's an issue with the internet where you can find all of this information. You can find anything. People, there's the level of people that literally are so gullible that they believe every single thing that they see on the internet.
Yeah.
Then there's the people that are so gullible, are on the next level down, where they go, I only believe that if there's a certain amount of people that believe it or share it. Then there's the next level down where they say, only if it comes from specific sources like the media. And then there's the next level down. You keep going down and down and down until finally you get to the person that goes, I don't believe anything, because how can I believe it? And that's kind of where I'm at right now, where it's like, even the media, all they seem to do right now is stay on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. They find whatever most people are talking about, and then they create a story on that based on people's perspectives that were there and saw the thing happen. And so it's like, they're not even doing what news media used to do, which is get to the source and go there and see the dang thing happening, right?
Right.
They're not even they're just following Twitter. And so now it's to the point where I can't even use them as a person that goes, I was not there. I don't know all the angles and the aspects of this. Again, that just leads me to, I can't know anything about this, just like I don't know about virology, just like I don't know about a lot of things.
Yeah.
So I want to get to that next level down. Like, that's all I can do.
Yeah.
That's all.
Because I don't want to fight about it. I don't want to do that. So I need to go another level down.
I want to create a solution. I don't want to fight about it.
Yeah.
I want all of us to come together and unite under one solution that helps us make this issue null. And you cannot do that through tit and tat. Just doesn't happen.
Yeah. True. Agreed.
So how do we get more people to start thinking about those levels down? Because the way I did it is I got really into philosophy and I started spewing out a bunch of really complicated ideas and trying to explain my theory of everything and how the world works, thinking that, if I just explain how the universe and existence works, people will see that that's how it works and then they'll jump on board. No, it's too complicated. People can't just do what I did. That's a very long path. And it's I had to go through hell to get there. So most people don't want to do that. How do you get people to just start looking at the next levels?
It's tough, man. Yeah. I mean, all I can do is try to promote the discussion, try to get people excited enough on a tip, for instance, that they might want to not tat about for a little while. So hopefully just bring them to a place where they look up and go, well, where the hell are we right now? I've never had this type of conversation. I mean, that's the only way I can go about it, really. Mm-hmm. But that usually backfires because people really do not want to go there. And so it's not a successful tactic. That's all I'll say. Or I'm not doing it well enough.
Let me bring up a really relevant and touchy subject that might help us lead into that. I had a conversation with a friend the other day where I started getting tit for tat because, you're beaten down by the weak. And we've talked about that where you're at the end of your rope. And so emotions can really get a hold of you very easily when you're at the end of your rope. You don't have like the energy to even put anything past your emotional response. Mm-hmm. And I got to that point and there was a conversation that kind of reflected one of our conversations. And I tried to recreate our conversation, but I did it very badly. It was not, I ended up sounding not like myself and not, I didn't pull everybody into the idea. It was really just like, wow, you're being very pompous about your ideology right now. And I was just like, happens to all of us and it happens to me. So, but the situation was life, you have a lifelong friend who is very BLM and they're a person that's really gotten you, they go to the extreme with it, but there's something in there where it did get me and a bunch of my friends, like really thinking about the situation, like educating ourselves on the situation and trying to see it from their perspective and also the world at large and all of the issues. And, even thinking about like topics that I haven't even ever thought about where I'm not going to get into that yet, but okay. So they get me thinking about their side of the story. Let's just call it that. And then another lifelong friend, they've met these two people have met a bunch of times and they've been friends and had the same friend circle and they've known each other for a long time, not necessarily like best friends and see each other all the time, but they've known each other forever. Mm-hmm. And the one is becoming a cop.
Okay.
So immediately, the BLM supporter now absolutely hates the other person because they're becoming a cop.
Right.
In this climate. So here we go, tit for tat, surface level race. There obviously is issues with both paradigms, both ideologies.
Yeah.
The BLM movement, there's issues with the cops, there's issues with everybody's got their issues. And it was that immediate like hate and just disregard for the other person, even though you've known them forever. And sometimes what happens is this situation brings up old thoughts about the person, like things where you might have thoughts, not so well of them at one point, but it wasn't too big of a deal at that point. So you just kept being friends and going on. But then what happens is this one moment in time culminates all of those other feelings into, yeah, they were always kind of like that. You know, once a racist, always a racist. Like you just know, like I can point to all these different things, and that's why they're becoming a cop. And it's like, no, man, we all have our issues. And, this person was like, I was joining the force way before this all blew up. Like this isn't a response. This was the path the whole time, So that's where it does get dicey, because, I try to bring up our whole conversation of, isn't the end goal that we don't want racists? And if you don't want racists, how do you get there? Well, there's only, so many paths you can take. One is you change their mind so they're not racist anymore. The Daryl Davis path, which is very complicated, hard, and it's on a case-by-case basis. Again, you're poking at one of those elements at a time on that surface level, infinite, complex. So there's that way. And then there's you can just nullify them by killing them. And a lot of people choose that way, man. A lot of people are like, yeah, I would love to kill all racists. It's like, can you not see the issue with that? Like, that's where I started getting real pompous and getting heated about it. Cause I was like, really? Like, well, but the last thing I want to say about it is, this is what I want to riff on is there's other paths though, that we didn't really bring up, which is, so you can do the Daryl Davis thing and change one mind at a time. Sit down. We're not well-read black men that can sit down with a KKK member and just say, like, listen to our conversation right now. Do you not believe me now? We are white guys talking to other white guy racists. If we were in that position, we're probably not going to be as, it's not going to be as easy, not even as easy. It's not even going to, we don't have that punch of like, no, you're having a conversation with a black man right now and you're having a good time. We're laughing, we're joking. Right. And then how is this, how am I not the same as you? We don't even have that aspect. So when we're talking about other people, there's that layer down. Instead of one racist at a time, is there a way to get multiple racists changing their minds and it's not through attacking the ideology, because again, when you start attacking the ideology, they're just going to defend themselves. They feel attacked. So is there that layer down, man, where you can get groups and pull them to the other side of like, there's no reason to be hateful or hurtful to other people and want to kill them or be scared of them because of the color of their skin. Or, can't you realize that all people are scary sometimes, dependent on the color of their skin? Can't you realize that, how do you get the whole group? If we can solve that, man, we're literally talking about world peace at this point. But I'm just saying, like, that's where every conversation I need it to go. You know what I'm saying? Like, I need it to go there.
Sure. Do you have any examples of how that might happen? Because what I'm thinking is for one thing, I mean, Daryl Davis, he personally went a level below the surface. He could have obviously been like, absolutely not am I going to go interview that KKK. That's the opposition. He could have said that. But he went a deeper level, and somewhere on that level touched this one dude, and it changed something there, one case. But the thing is people are very reasonable. Persons are very reasonable. People are not. See, it's hard. It would be harder to change a whole group of people because there's so many more factors in everyone's minds or whatever. But I think so, since, whatever Daryl did, he went below and back up and changed one, but that one definitely changed more. I mean, there had to be other dudes in other, factions of the KKK. Like, did you hear about that? I don't think I might question this depending on those cases, those people, and how sort of close they are to possibly tipping over. But I think it does reach more than one in that way.
Yeah, I can see that. The one example I have is, I brought this up, I don't remember when, or if it was even in one of our podcast settings, but it was my idea about why racism as a whole makes no sense.
Right.
I don't know if you remember that. Like why,
right.
And I'll just repeat it. So, and it gets back to how the existence works, and it gets very complicated, and that's why it's hard to talk about with people. But if you think about the fact that it's not even existence, evolution, let's take that layer of it. Evolution, how evolution works. You take multiple variables and you combine them into one variable, like one thing, so that you have the ability to overcome certain situations. So, I guess I could just use race as the example. We talked about, depending on where you live on the earth, you need to survive as a human. You need to take in a certain amount of sunlight. You need to get the vitamin D created in your body, which coronavirus, vitamin D seems to be a major factor. That vitamin D deficiency could lead to you having a harder time with coronavirus. I don't know that for a fact.
That's crazy, man.
I can all look at the numbers and all that. But anyway, so darker skin, the other thing, but then there's the opposite. That's the paradox where you need the sunlight, but too much sunlight causes cancer.
Of course.
You can get too much, you can overdose on sunlight basically. So when you're in a place, when you're in areas of the world where you're closer to the sun for longer periods of time, you're getting more UV rays, you need a defense mechanism so you don't take in too much, but you also get what you need, right? So then you have darker skin. When it's cloudy all the time and you don't get sun, you need lighter skin so you can take in as much of that little bit of sun that you get to survive as the human. Again, the human kind of carved out its path on how to survive throughout all of the elements of the world, all the elements that the world throws at it, so that it can adaptively survive through all of those elements, right? Which there's this symbiosis, there's this environment, there's this, you have to work with the elements around you to survive and carve out that path. But the path is always changing. Mm-hmm. So evolution, what evolution does is when we have sex and mate with each other, we take your characteristics and my characteristics and we put them together and we put it into one thing. So that thing, the combination of all of our characteristics, where I made it through these environments, which changed my DNA, literally changed my DNA because I was exposed to chemicals. I was exposed to different air densities, all these different gravitational things, all these different elements literally change your body along the way of your life. Take all those characteristics, all those DNA changes, mix it with somebody else's. You have this kind of like instant, really crazy change of DNA that may be better suited to handle whatever is to come as the world evolves around you.
Right.
And so that's evolution. That's literally trying to survive in the ever-changing world and adapt to the things around you. That's evolution, right? So the basis of that whole thing is that you need variability, because we do not know what is to come. We cannot predict it. It actually gets to your science point too, about human prediction. It is the worst. We do not predict things well at all. And the farther you get out into the future, the higher margin of error of your prediction there is.
Definitely. Of course.
Because we can't foresee what's to come. So again, because we can't foresee what's to come, nature carves out these paths and makes these general aspects of a single thing, a single species, a single race, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to call it. Take any node of existence and they make these little single packages of things, right? Because it's fighting with everything else. And so you need the variability to have a better probability of surviving the future. Mm-hmm. Climate change is, whether you think climate change is happening or not, that doesn't even really matter. You can get into that and use that as a aspect of your argument. But what really matters is I don't even know where I'm going to end up on the world at any point in time.
Yeah.
If I end up in Africa, man, and I live there, and my family's, I start raising a family there, and then they raise their family there. The skin is literally going to change and adapt to the environment that I put myself in. And,
right.
you know, we don't know what's to come in the world. We don't know if we're ever going to maybe even leave this planet. We don't know what human adaptations are going to be better suited for different environments. We can't predict that stuff. So evolution just takes care of it for us.
Right.
So the more variability in every characteristic of the human race, the better. That actually ensures the survival of the human race, because somebody out there may have an adaptation that's better suited for some future environment that I don't have and you don't have.
Yeah.
So again, you need variability. You need the differences. You need the diversity. So that's literally how existence works on a physical level. Again, you can take that and condense it down and take the archetypes and go, that's actually how atoms work too, is the oscillation between two opposites. But then when you get groups of atoms, they create this variability that lets them grow and become more complex things to interact with more complex things. It just grows and grows and grows. And that's what we're doing, man. Yeah. So it literally does not make sense to be racist as far as the human race is concerned. If you want to survive as a human, if you personally want to survive, and then you want a lineage of the human race to survive so that the species doesn't get wiped out or become extinct, you need everybody. And there you go. There's your argument against racism. That is such a complex idea that's multi-leveled. It takes a intuitive thought process about existence that, again, who am I going to talk to about that? Who other than you and me? Like, there are people, we know people, we've talked to them. But as far as the majority of the human population, nobody wants to talk about that. You're getting too complicated. All I know is kill people bad. All I know is we are all human. It should be as simple as we are all human, so we should all like each other. Yeah, it should be that simple, but it isn't. That's the problem, is that it isn't. And there are people that do want to kill you because of the color of your skin, regardless of that fact. So how do we get those people that think that way on board, and that's
This is like, the classic question. I remember one of the books of Krishnamurti dialogues, and I'm not sure who it was, but I think it might have been Bohm. It might have been in the ending of time, where they were this was their question, how to reach these other people. And I know we've talked about this before, because it was always something to me. It's always stuck with me that I recall like vividly, because I thought it was such a novel idea. And him and Bohm were saying that if there were even 10 people, if there were 8 more of us in this discussion right now, that those 10 people could change the world. Now, when he said that, I mean, he was counting himself and Bohm as 2 of the people, I'm sure of it. And I mean, like, there are more than 10 of those people, but maybe one of them is, a guy in the Himalayas, and then another guy is, somewhere in Asia or whatever, like these sages or whoever, how are they going to get together? They haven't gotten together, which is interesting. But, I mean, they never really answered that, except to say, if there was this highly unlikely scenario, it would be very good. So they never gave an example of how. But I suppose, they were doing it by, recording their dialogue and putting a book out in the 1970s or whatever it was. That was their way to help. But yet again, Krishnamurti said at the end of his life that hardly anyone ever got what he was talking about. Hardly anyone changed fundamentally from what he said. Even people that, his students that he had been with for 20 years or whatever, they were basically the same. And they weren't like whatever it was that Krishnamurti had. So that's discouraging. I don't know what to make of that, But
the one thing I was thinking about along the way is something that I always throw out, and it's the basis of life is perfect, but it's are we ever going to have a world where there's no racists?
Sure. I mean, yes, valid question. I don't think so. But when I think of like the best world, the utopia, I mean, I'm not really saying, I don't imagine that they're completely gone, but just that the overwhelming feeling of daily life is harmonious instead of, if you're, I don't have to give an example. That's it.
So maybe there's racists, but they just don't act.
Well, that's not what I want either. I mean, in a world, there's some movie, some fucking Mad Max movie, and like, let's say the, Escape from LA, like the LA breaks off from California, and on that island are all the the crazy murderers and rapists and all that stuff. Like, they're there. Like, they can do what they do to each other. Like, they're doing it to each other. They love it. They love that stuff. But we're over here, and mostly everything's harmonious and good. We no longer, in a world where like there could be terrorists in caves in some country we're never going to have contact with, in this other world. But instead, I don't know. It's just not like that. We go and pick these people out. We're starting wars. Tons of people are dying over this. I just think there's some other way to deal with these people. I mean, it really gets into so much but
there's something to say about the the evolution of it, which is trying to think of a path that doesn't make me sound somewhat like a Bible thumper. But I think that's the only way to go here. It seems to me that the reason these flare-ups are happening when it comes to tension between ideologies, and it seems like it's ever more divisive, and it's the lines are not so much blurred that they're becoming very defined. And maybe that perspective is not entirely true. Maybe we just have a distorted view of history, and it's always been that way, and we feel like it's even worse today than it's ever been. The country's not united, and especially during a pandemic, a global pandemic, you think that would unite everybody together to take care of this one issue, but now we're not. We're dividing over another issue, right? But it seems to me that these situations, these tit for tat situations, really highlight something. They highlight what we're missing that makes these situations null. They highlight it's kind of like, in where I was saying Bible thumper, it's kind of like when Christians are saying, you see all these issues, it's because you don't believe in Jesus. It's because we've lost the way. We don't believe in the Bible anymore. You know what I'm saying? But I don't think it's that. I don't think it's believing in something. It's more of a forgetting of something. It's more of a forgetting about the archetypes, forgetting about those lower levels that can help push you forward in a more meaningful, and that's where the Bible thumper comes, the meaning of it. Like, why is there racists in the world, and why will there always usually be racists in the world? Why is there tit for tat, and why will there always be tit for tat? Mm-hmm. And that's the whole life is perfect thing. There's always that resistance. There's always that opposition. There's always that thing you have to checks and balances. There's a thing you have to overcome to be a better whatever you are, human, animal, world, environment, whatever you are. You have to butt up against something to overcome it. And so for me, it's I don't think there's ever not going to be racist, but there's going to be periods where the idea of racism isn't as potent. It's not as a
driving force in people's actions.
Exactly. Yeah. Because what'll happen is there's not going to be an end to this. There's going to be an apex where we get to this place where most people have come together and have kind of gotten to that place you're talking about where it's not that it doesn't exist. It's just not really a driving force in our lives, where people aren't getting job opportunities, where people aren't being pushed into poverty because of the color of their skin and the histories of their race. And people aren't, we're going to get to some kind of a better level of where we are now. And then it will settle for a period of time. But then the fact that it's never going to go away, it's going to pop up again. It's going to become potent again. And we're going to make ourselves as a human species even better because of it.
Right.
And you can think of like, well, there has to be an end. There has to be a place where there's no place to get better. And I don't think there ever will be. I think as long as existence and limitation is the way of the reality that we're living in right now, which maybe, if you think about aliens and the whole idea that like, maybe aliens are us in the future. Like we get so far in technology that we can time travel and they're actually just us coming back from the future, right? That's why they have bigger heads, smaller mouths, bigger eyes. They can see more. They can think more. Our mouths are actually getting smaller. I don't know if you know that, but if you look at like, old, the old bones that they dig up of like hominids, they're always like their jaws are very large. And they're like, that's why their teeth are generally straight too, because they have a more room because they were eating different things. They weren't cooking everything and mashing everything down like we do. So because we eat such soft cooked foods, our mouths are getting smaller and smaller over time. So again, it's like that. The idea of the alien is, that thing that people visualize is basically our future. So if we get to that point, I bet you the aliens have issues, man. The aliens have, there's the grays and there's the whatever, the whites. There's the grays and there's the whites, and they're angry at each other because of some conflict and blah, blah. I don't think we ever get out of this, but I think it does make us better humans over time. I think it's necessary that we think about these things and get into these situations so that we can evolve and become a better version of ourselves that is more capable to survive whatever the world, existence, and the environment is going to throw at us later.
Okay. I will say that I think there is a possibility, but it's just really making the net wider, or the fractal, just taking it to a different step, because within this universe, within this video game, humanity, you could say like we might perfect to a point where, we don't even need to have a body anymore, and et cetera. And it just keeps getting lighter and lighter until Big Bang, and then it comes back around. But then I think that process happens over and over. And it would take, it's already been 13 billion years of this, simulation or whatever you want to call it. So it might take a very, very long time, but I think it could possibly end, but just to restart, because
it's a cycle.
So,
like everything. Speaking of cycles, just a funny little anecdote. Kristen asked what I wanted for my birthday, and because you can't do anything in a pandemic or the fires, and you can't go outside because of the air quality, not much I can do for my birthday, right? You can't really even leave my house. So all I could think about was food. And I was thinking, like, what are the things I haven't had in a while? And because we just became friends with this couple they went to culinary school, and so they're amazing at food.
For sure.
I was like, they made us really good pizza. And, in California, there's no good pizza.
Yeah.
Being a New Yorker that moved to California, there's just no good pizza. And they made us really good pizza, like New York style, like perfect. And so I was like, I wonder if they have a wing recipe. Like, I'm going to make some hot wings. And so we made hot wings with them. We ate wings. Then she goes on her Facebook and sees the Facebook memories. Last year, we had wings in Uray, Colorado on the same day. 2 years ago, we made wings in this house on that same day.
Yeah.
There's a 3-year wing loop, and that was all that was documented. I wonder if there was a 4 or a 5-year wing loop. It's these little, and you know how I've been saying, like, we've just been seeing a lot of synchronicities, and that's how I kind of know through all the crap. That's where some faith comes in, through all the crap. There's these weird coincidences that keep happening where I know that the cycle is continuing itself. And so far, the cycle has treated me pretty well, even throughout all of the crap. So it's like something, we're on a good path, whatever that may be, right?
Hopefully.
But the wings, man, like wings for 3 years in a row on the same day. Life is a cycle, and you can do the whole world. Well, like it's your subconscious, or it's maybe you saw those pictures and that's why you're thinking about it and you want to wait. Right. You can do all these things, but none of that matters. It's still a cycle. No matter what the reason is, it's still a cycle.
Right.
So the cycle exists. Get used to it, I guess that's the whole thing. The cycle exists. Get used to it. Mm. And as far as there is something there though, that we're trying to solve the root of the problem, which is racism itself, which extends its tendrils into so many different aspects of life. Right now it's policing. Years ago, it was voter reform, which still, there's systematic things in place that still make that a reality. But they kind of took care of the main issue, right? But there is still voter suppression based on race, which is also based on resources of certain areas of the country. Blah, 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 blah. Before that, it was literally like humans owning humans of a different, just because of their race, and it's the same situation where they took care of you can't directly own a human. Well, let's just put them in prisons. Let's find this thread that we can find to put a majority of that race in prisons, and then we say that you can't own slaves unless they're a convict, and you can lock them up. You do have to pay them something, but let's call it 13 cents an hour. It's like, man, still slavery, all right? So we're trying to solve this root issue, which is a big, big task, and we're not going to get to it in one podcast, but I think we've hit on a lot of good points here. But there is also the issue of the institutions themselves, like policing, where it can be argued that if there's always going to be racists in the world, and there's always going to be a certain population of racists, because every tit needs a tat, every system needs some kind of oppositional system that can perpetuate the evolution of it and make it greater. If there's always going to be some sort of population of that means that every institution is probably most likely going to have some population of said racists, right? Whether it's academia, whether it is policing, whether it's government, whether it's whatever you want to call it, there's going to have that, right?
Sure.
But what that means is tit for tat, it's also going to evolve. But it is going to get better. And so it all ties back to what you said last podcast, which is like, what is the best way that we can evolve these systems? Right now, they're playing tit for tat. They're arguing with each other. They're killing each other. They're lighting things on fire. They're burning things down. They're, protesting. They're yelling at each other. And you're saying, what about Daryl Davis? What about this needs? It's already obvious that these things need to evolve. It's already obvious.
Sure. It's getting old, man. It's getting old.
Yeah. Like, how are these institutions going to evolve? And we talked about that, just getting rid of them. There's a reason they exist. There's a reason there are specific reasons, like there's serial killers.
Yeah.
People that are literally just out to hurt people.
Right.
Probably because they've been hurt throughout their lives. So you can get into psychology of that, whatever. But the reality is there's crazy people.
Yeah.
There's some people that just want to blow up the earth. If they had their hands on the nukes, they just press the button and just let the whole thing implode because they think that humans are a disease, which kind of are. But there's people that literally wipe them out. I say we're a disease and we need to make ourselves better. Some people say we're a disease and we need to be wiped out from the earth. Or some people say the earth just needs to be wiped out. There's crazy people. We need some kind of law enforcement to take care of that, right? So you can't just wipe them out. You can't just get rid of them.
Yeah.
Because what ends up happening is like what happened in Seattle with the whole CHOP thing, where like people recreate it in like not such a good way, where they
tell me about it. I don't know about it.
Oh, so there was kind of like an area. Was it Seattle or Portland? I want to say it was Seattle.
Right.
The protesters took over an area of the city. I think it was like around the courthouse. It was basically downtown. They took it over, and they basically said like, this is a no policing zone. They put up barriers. They set up guards all around the thing. And it was kind of like no capitalism. Everybody was just trading and bartering, and it was a hippie paradise and all this stuff. But then come to find out, they were policing. What they were doing is they were policing each other. So there was people getting beat up. Somebody ended up getting shot and died. And that's why you have to have some sort of order, because there's just crazy people. And I don't even feel good calling them crazy people. There's people with opposite ideologies, or people with trauma, or people with situations that you've never been in that you couldn't possibly understand why they are the way they are, because you've never lived their life. And so you start clashing. There's going to be clashing. There's going to be tit for tat. So you have to have some kind of system to help mitigate that. So when it comes to police reform, police abolishment, whatever you want to call it, there's something wrong with the police right now. That's the institution we're focusing on.
Yeah.
And like we've said, this extends into every other institution. So let's try to solve the root problem.
Yeah.
So that the police problem is solved.
Right. Yeah. I think it would require like a lot. But for starters, and I think this is why Krishnamurti a lot like defined words as he was using them.
Yeah.
And kind of, he would define a word that we commonly use, but he would give the definition to indicate how he specifically was using it, and it was usually with a totally different implication. I can't think of an example right now, but what he was doing was, and he wasn't redefining anything. He was actually giving the real definition for things, but he was redefining how people were he wasn't just giving a speech and using these words because we know that people can hear that speech in a bunch of different ways in tits and tats, and we're not going to go anywhere with it. So it's how to get in, how to turn the people that are listening to this around effectively. And I think one of the biggest issues is language, like the ambiguity of language, the way that we can privately take something totally differently than what the person means. There's another factor, that a possibility. I was saying this to my friend. This is, I was listening to a Russian spy talk about mind control methods. And he was like, there are different steps. And first you create chaos that creates division. And then once you get them separated, you say things to them, blah, blah, blah. And he said at a certain point, if I brainwash somebody into thinking that the sky is green, and then 10 years later, they've been thinking that, and I bring in a scientist, I bring in a color chart or whatever, all the actual proof that would prove to this person that what that color is actually called blue. This is a bad example because what is that thing that we see that we all call blue? But you get what I mean. So if brainwashing is effective at that point where you are telling him, I am an expert on color, sir, you are wrong. That person will not believe you, even if you hold the truth up in front of him. And I think it has to do with the way you can sort of hide the truth in language. I think that's why the possibility of manipulators, a shadow government or lizard people or whatever, is appealing to me because it's obvious that it can be done. And we know there are crazy people who want to just blow up the earth or whatever. So it's not too far of a jump to think if they had the power, they would do such a thing or whatever, So, and you can put something out, like you can put information out that's factually true, but the way you say it changes the way it's interpreted. You don't even have to manipulate the event, but just the way we interpret it. And that's with language. So I think, again, it's talking about how to think about how to think. Meanwhile, like scrupulously redefining these points. And it's something, I think I said this in the last podcast, I've always wanted to just break out all the Krishnamurti books and just lay them down and really try, because like you said earlier, way earlier, when you read that Bohm book and you don't really know what that chapter said, but at the end of that chapter, you get a sort of an abstract sense of what he's saying. And so I know what Krishnamurti's saying in that, like, that feeling through reading all this stuff. And I know, like, he has this point and, the observer and the observed and stuff like that. I know what he talks about and what it means, but he won't systemize. He won't give the teaching. He wants you to intuitively get into it, but he failed and he admits he failed. So, I think if you systemize it, say, well, we start here and then according to this is what he said and you would end here. That I think it has to go about that way. It has to be gone about in that way of sort of systemizing the bigger picture. His work for one, but so because I was talking to my friend and he doesn't know about, like, he doesn't have this bigger sense about the lower level of, why this information was novel to me, why it was important to me. He didn't see the bigger thing. And he just asked why is this important to be solved, this case? And I couldn't tell him what that wider thing is, that feeling underneath, if you haven't been there. But I was, like, in days afterwards, I was thinking, like, I'm really going to try to give, like, a detailed account of what I think is, like, really fucking going on here. You know what I'm saying? I know that I'm wrong, of course, right? And that we can't know, and that's all a part of it. But I like the challenge of, because it can't just remain in this realm where me and you are like, I know what you're saying, but it's so hard to talk about. How do we got to come to a point where the language we're using and creating to talk about this becomes very swift, So,
well, a couple things there when you're talking about Krishnamurti redefining the word back to its root of what it originally was used to point towards, whereas the words, like everything else, evolve where we use them in different contexts, different definitions. Today, Bohm does that a lot too. He does that, like, if you watch a video of him, he's doing that all the time. Like, even breaking them down, getting their Latin roots and everything. So they're doing what we're talking about. They're taking the tit for tat. They're going back down to the roots, the singularity, and then projecting it back up into the complexity that we talk about today, right?
Right.
And when it comes to language, it's really hard to choose what words you want to use because language, just like everything else, has become so complex. You can say 5 different words. They technically mean the same thing, but they all come from different perspectives pointing towards the same thing.
Sure.
So it's like when I was writing my book, it was really hard to choose what words to use because a lot of times words will direct you to a certain ideology. I'm using this set of words to describe this thing. Oh, this person must be a scientist. This other person's using this set of words. Yeah, he's definitely a Christian. This person's using this set of words. He's a Buddhist.
Exactly.
Using this set of words. They're whatever, name whatever ideology. Right. I did not want to be beholden to any one ideology, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole point of the book. It's my theory of everything. You need to take an account of everything. You need to take all of it into account to describe the all. So I can't be beholden to words. So there's a couple instances where I was doing this, and it gets messy, it gets complicated, it makes people not want to read it. But when you use like a slash, like it's like singularity slash singleness slash one slash blah blah. You just go. It's like these are all technically. I'm using all of these terms to describe the same thing. Use whatever term you want. I'm not talking about the word itself. I'm talking about the idea I'm trying to point to behind it. That's what you're talking. It's like, I want you to see this thing that I cannot describe.
So I just had this like very vivid example in my mind. It's a kind of absurd example, but the choice of words and et cetera, this issue. So there's a friend of mine. Now, everyone's been going crazy this year. I've gotten in fights with a lot of people. Not that I wanted to be in them, but just that I chose the wrong word. And it just became a fight because everyone's sensitive and that whole old, he must have always been like that, or what, that kind of stuff was coming out. So I was hanging out with my friend. He asked me, I hadn't seen him in a while, two guys hanging out, and he just asked me like, how's it going with the love life? And I was like, man, for all intents and purposes, which is important, I chose that importantly. For all intents and purposes, I'm basically celibate. Or I didn't say celibate. Okay, this is what I said. For all intents and purposes, I'm asexual. Now, my friend heard the word asexual, and he's not very bright because it's a biological word, has nothing to do with the current climate of gender pronouns and all that. It has nothing to do with that. And my choice in that word had nothing to do with it. But when he heard me say it, he accused me of appropriating that language, even though I'm not part of the LGBT, whatever, and that I can't use such a word as asexual because I am not something. He thought I was using a word like transsexual or something.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa. The word asexual, do you know what that means? So I stop. I stand back. I want him to know. I want to clear it up right away. He's wrong. And what I was saying was, again, I was chilling. It was just a fucking, casual statement. And so I was like, okay, not asexual, celibate. And then he goes, you can't say that either because you're not a monk or you're not this and that. But it doesn't matter if I'm like in a monastery, in my room, I'm sitting here. I can choose not to have sex. I can choose celibacy. You can't tell me I'm wrong for that. But see, like there's this sort of confusion about what the words meant that caused us. He was so angry at me, and I got angry after, maybe 10, 15 minutes of trying to correct this and be like, no, I think you misunderstood me. And then his response was, no, I didn't misunderstand you. I'm like, but I know that you did. So please whatever. And so that's the example of it. Weeks and weeks and weeks later, I came across this word. I've heard it before, some movie. I didn't know it was one word. I thought it was just someone choosing a nice little word. There's it's quirky alone. You ever heard of that? It's one word, quirky alone. Obviously, it's just someone who isn't actively looking for a romantic relationship, which is, I'm basically celibate. I'm basically asexual. Like, hello. And you give those 3 words to somebody to say it's in that ballpark, but I can't tell you.
Yeah. It's you didn't have the word at the moment. You had something you were pointing towards, but you couldn't technically choose the exact appropriate word, because really there is no exact appropriate word, and that's what you're getting. But also, who's to say you're not a monk?
I know. That was another point. Yes.
Yeah. What is
how can you tell me that? How can you tell me?
Well, who's to say you're not LGBTQ?
And so him doing that to me, even though I'm not a part of those things, but I take offense ideologically.
How do you even know you're not a part of those things?
I know. Yeah, it's just it gets so.
Life confused. Is fluid. We're humans. We're ever evolving. Everything's changing. One moment I'm one thing. One moment I'm another thing. There's no there's a singleness that is Rick, but there's no singleness as to what Rick is. The biology, my present self right now is completely than my present self right now.
Right.
We're let's get into some Buddhist language. We're a river. Yeah. The river is a single thing, but it's ever changing. It's never the same thing at any one time. And we're the same. So it's like, you're saying you're quirky alone now, man.
Yeah.
And that
it's not forever.
It's not forever. It may put you in a specific sect of people for the time being. LGBTQ. Yeah. Maybe right now you're questioning your sexuality and you're trying new things, and maybe you're.
How does he know that? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So how did he know that about that? The sexuality part, the religion part. Another part I forgot to mention is that I was telling him, I was like, yo, man, I was just giving an approximate word, man. And so he's already, attacked me on what he thinks that about my sexuality, religion. And then he goes, you're a writer. You are supposed to be more careful with your words than you are being right now. And was accusing me of using a word sort of not even lazily, but using it with such disrespect that I was using it as I don't know what he thought, but it was just on so many levels, I was like, how can you so misunderstand me? And I was getting to this point where I was like, dude, I've known you for 17 years, man. Why are you doing this? This isn't me, man.
So,
and I can be anything. I can be fluid on the river, but generally, come on, man, give me the benefit of the doubt.
There's also, it's exactly what you're talking about. It's language. He's bringing up a good point. He's bringing up the exact point that you just brought up 5 minutes ago. We all need to be more precise in our language to actively convey what we're trying to point at. And if one person doesn't get it from the language you're using, you try from a different angle. You try a different word, and so he is saying he has an idea about what you're trying to describe. Mm-hmm. You have an idea about what you're trying to describe. You're using specific words to point to that idea. He, whether correctly or incorrectly, is saying that you're not using the right words because he thinks you're trying to point to an idea, and he's saying those aren't the right words to point to the idea he thinks you're pointing to.
Yeah.
So there's confusion. There's confusion building. Honestly, he is in the wrong that he's not approaching the situation by using precise language to help you get to the word you're trying to find.
Right.
You are not using precise language to begin with to point to what you're trying to point to.
Right.
It necessitates a conversation so that both of you can come upon the precise language that helps you understand each other. And that's what you're trying to do. And that's what we're trying to do. And that's what we're trying to cultivate here. That's exactly what we're talking about, is that we are all misconstruing people's ideologies based on language. Also, on top of that, we're making assumptions about what they actually mean. On top of that, you can't even know if those assumptions are true until you work through the language and actually come to the root of the problem. Right. And that takes a conversation. That doesn't take, I hate you because you didn't say the right thing, or your ideology doesn't make any sense to me in the way that you described it.
I get it,
why do we still have English class in school? Mm-hmm. We all speak English. We learned it from our parents. We speak English on a daily. Why are we taking English class all the way up until college, man? They teach English class in college. People major in it that already speak English. Why? Yeah. It's because it's such a complex. It's actually one of the most complex languages. Language itself is complex. We're all just a bunch of dummies trying to figure out life.
Yeah.
So that's, to me, it's that breakdown of pride is, it's kind of like the first, it's like what's necessary to go, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm right. What does it look like for me to be wrong? What is that like? How could I be wrong? How am I wrong? And that's the philosophy that I continually have to remind myself of. I'm human. I get in those bouts, I get in those moods, those emotions, and I forget to ask myself that question. I get defensive, I get reactive, and generally, when I look back on all those situations, they never went well.
Yeah, that's true.
My defensiveness never really turned out a better connection with somebody. It never turned out into a better solution where I felt comfortable enacting that solution without having repercussions about it. It's like you get a little tiff with somebody, and now that's like a looming presence over your future conversations. And just, for me, my end game is that I want to feel good about myself. I want to feel good about my actions. I want to feel present. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be shameful. I don't want to have these negative feelings in my body. How do I get there? It comes with respecting other people's opinions and feeling better about our conversation because we helped find that thread of commonality where if we had a debate, a quote unquote argument, I see it as more of a discussion with where we take things. Is like if you have a discussion and though they're saying the complete opposite of what I'm saying, we both come out feeling like we were heard because we found those threads where I'm like, listen, these are the aspects of my life that made me think the opposite of what you're thinking. I get the aspects of your life. I'm listening and I understand how those aspects could have led you to the complete opposite of what I'm thinking. And that's something I might need to explore more because I never have before. It's new pieces of information. It's new data. I still might be pro-life or pro-choice. I still might be whatever ideology you want to take on for the time being. But it doesn't mean I don't see the faults in my thinking because every ideology has faults. So I have to see that. And I forget that all the time. I forget it. I'm emotional. I get tired. And the program isn't running at the time. And sometimes I get caught up in that and I just got to bring myself back to, hold on, Rick, hold on. How can you be wrong in this? How can you find it? You're wrong in some respects. So find that wrongness.
I think for me and you, that's, although we forget in the heat of the moment, I mean, that's taken for granted. Mm-hmm. For me, that's taken for granted. So I think the frustration that comes in, like I can lose it, but I can stop myself and I can look at it and feel bad about it. That's not the outcome I wanted and whatever. The issue for me the most is when go back to the example of my friend and the misunderstanding of this word. When I stop to say, like, it doesn't necessarily have to do with the word. There's just a breakdown that is, I don't know how to describe it. It's just,
is it respect? Because that's exactly what I was thinking. It's kind of like, it is. You know me, man. Like, if we're having this, there's no need for the attacking portion. There's no need for
the. And so, okay, so I guess what I'm saying is, all right, I have a, historically a tendency to have a temper. So people have an image about me. And if I am frustrated in the littlest bit now, these same people, if they hear me say something a certain way, they'll be like, there you go, getting mad again. And it's like, well, that second thing you just did, that's what got me mad, and like, I have every right to feel like if I'm trying to be like, no, my friend, I didn't, please hear me out. And I'm like struggling to be heard. And there's going to be some stress in my sound, but like, and that is fine. That's reasonable. If that other person was to pause and be like, this guy's getting really upset, I think maybe I did misunderstand him if my friend would have said that. But the thing that like really gets me into trouble, like the area, because like I can let it go if I don't forget what the bigger picture is. If someone's being difficult with me, I can be like, you know what, this is tit for tat and it's not going to end well. I can drop it or whatever. But yeah, it's when it's the person that I feel should know me, and that if I was to just drop it, they're still going to walk away and think that about me. Like my friend's going to be like, boy, I really can't believe he said that thing or whatever, even though we dropped it. I can't, so I really want to like, no, please hear me out. I really want you to know. And it like refuses to be heard. So it's kind of a respect thing.
Well, it takes coming to the table in that way, because, you just said that, like, I tend to have a temper and my friends kind of know that and whatnot, but I've never seen that in you. And I've only known you for, I don't even know how long now, like a year.
Well, more than that, I was even in California. That was a year ago. We've been talking. That was a year ago?
Jeez. Man,
that was like
I don't know time anymore.
Well, we were emailing for like a year before that, so
it's all relative, right? It's all eternity. But so I've technically known you forever, but
yeah.
So, but you know what I'm saying? Like, we give each other that respect and that patience, and that when you start talking about sensitive issues, it's necessary to have that sensitivity and that patience.
Yeah,
because language is so dicey inherently, and on top of that, we use it wrong, and we're not good at using it. Hence, there's
and we're emotionally charged right now, so it's extra dangerous.
Exactly. So maybe that's it, man. We just got to giving each other the time of day. We gotta.
Well, yeah.
We need to listen. It goes back to that fundamental principle: is like, no matter how abhorrent somebody is, you have to listen, or else it becomes a fight that you have to overcome somebody. You have to take them out. You have to nullify them through force. If you don't listen,
right,
have to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Even if, again, you can say the most egregious things. I have family that, in the political climate, I'm technically, from the perspective of everybody else, I'm supposed to hate them. I'm not going to hate them.
Yeah.
I want to know why it is the way they think, because I came from you. I have your genetics. How do we have such complete different ideologies when my neurons fire in somewhat the same way that yours do?
Mm-hmm.
That's a really complicated question, and I have to give some patience, and I have to listen, because there's no other way to get that information,
Mm-hmm.
And that's that. It's funny that all of this grew out from some quote unquote propaganda on the internet of viruses. It's kind of like that. And again, when you show that to somebody, when you sent that to me, my initial reaction was, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And I'm going, but why am I thinking that? Why do I never did tests on viruses.
Yeah.
I learned it in school, but that was given to me by other people. A lot of it, again, when you start reading about it, a lot of it, you can develop these systems that make sense.
Yeah.
And there's some things about what that guy specifically said that didn't make sense. And I remember thinking about it directly after. I was like, actually, technically, that doesn't even make logical sense. But put that aside. Just put that aside. We don't even need to talk about that. And that's why I'm glad you went that direction. It's like, it's not even about the tit for tat. It's about the thing underneath, which is like the information. Why is this so polarizing? This guy has a perspective that it's possible you're not seeing.
Right.
But you're so confident that you do see it, even though you've never looked at a virus through a microscope.
Right. And so why not try it? Just, you can still be absolutely correct when we finish this discussion. Go back to thinking that later. But right now, why can you put that aside? That tendency, that impulse to do the, devil's advocate.
And look what it did for us. Look at this whole conversation. Most of it had nothing to do with viruses.
Almost none of it. Yeah,
almost
for sure.
None of it. Yeah.